Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Fabian Suidin Putra. People usually call me Fabian, and I'm from University of Gajah Mada and majoring in computer science. Right now, currently, I'm in State College in my campus, Pennsylvania State University. I'm currently enrolled in psychology classes, labor employment classes, and information people and technology class. Now, I've heard of the IISMA program from my head of program study back in University of Gajah Mada. Next, I started my application process by taking the Duo English test and writing essays that were required for the program. So, I started preparing the US by making J1 visas and continued to pack clothes, especially winter clothes. For me, the most difficult process was knowing that my flight was scheduled 1 week late than the actual start of the semester. Arriving here, my first noticeable cultural difference was seeing how small and peaceful and charming how the city is. And most of people here are walking instead of taking cars or motorcycles just like back home in Indonesia. But my biggest culture shock was the people itself. Everyone was very nice, friendly, by making small talk, which shocked me because not many people in Indonesia ask questions like how was your day or how is it going, and not many people answer it too. So that was my biggest cultural shock. Another cultural difference was the food. The food here are not so flavorful like back home in Indonesia, and it's so dry. So when I go to the dining hall, I try to find the closest thing that represent Asian cuisine. Like they usually have rice, fried rice, and fried chicken. So by that, and drinking more water to make the food not so dry, it really helped.
At first, it was hard to understand the language because other than looking in videos or internet or studying English, now live teachers and native languages started to compile in my head and start talking, which was at the beginning was hard to process in my head, but under any circumstances I adapt into the situation to understand more what they were saying and help me more focused to the study itself. There are some differences when I start learning in Penn State and back home in University of Gajah Mada. The one main difference is how the lecturer or the professor itself started more learning in class interactive and two-way, and be mindful of what the students are thinking and what the students are feeling. And besides that, how they facilitate us to be independent studies, and they actually facilitate it with replying emails quick and things like that. So they took independent studies as serious as possible, yet they still facilitate. In Penn State, I didn't have a lot of time to balance everything out since the time there is only one semester, but there are some study habits and pace during my study abroad that I adapted to. Mostly, the first thing is more in time management, so I can finish all my work earlier so that I could spend the weekend exploring the campus and the country itself. And other than that, the pace of the study is by reading more and learning more from books and other resources other than just presentation in the class. I did have final exams during my study in Penn State. What is interesting is how the questionnaire was mostly multiple choices and with hundreds to 75 questions. So in a short span of time, I adapt into answering the multiple choices quick and mostly accurate that I believe in. Other activities outside of classes, I mostly joined sponsored student associations. In IISMA is a sponsored program, so I interacted a lot of other international students that are outside of US that are also sponsored, mostly from Malaysia, Arabic, Indian. So knowing that we all work hard for what we accomplish and being sponsored to study, which is kind of cool, and we shared some our own knowledge and our different perspective in life. And other that we also play basketball together and just spending time hanging out dinner and and a lot of other stuff that we compile in the days that we meet. If I can go back in time, I would probably spend more time doing other activities such as watching more basketball games and football games, since it's part of the United States culture, and more embrace in the environment of watching the games, and even if I could play more sports there, it would be much more fun because it was really limited to my options. After my accomplishing IISMA studies in Penn State, what really underlines me is I took mostly psychological classes there because of my other interest than my back home major in computer science. So really understanding mental health and spreading more awareness to it, since it's such an important part in life, yet but it's related to academically also. So it's really a useful knowledge to have, since probably there's not really much studies in here back in Indonesia. So by getting that kind of knowledge back in Penn State, it really makes my mind more open and more understanding of the situation that we live in, and what I can practice to the real world, and for myself and other people too. There is not one memorable experience from being at IISMA, because every day was a different story and a place to live in. So I think the most memorable experience is IISMA everything, because every day I live in dorm and hanging out with people outside of my country, and sticking together with my friends, and it's just a unbuyable memories to be experienced, and it was very blessed that I could be part of it as the first batch of IISMA. The most valuable thing that I learned from as a IISMA awardee is the way to adapt to a new place, and the experience itself by learning how to cope with different situation and uncomfortable situation, and pushing me more outside of the comfort zone, and really bent me to make decisions that I could usually do not make here back in Indonesia, and really expanding and broadening my own knowledge academically. And it's a blessing to be part of the IISMA award. What aspect from your host country and university that you hope to be implemented in Indonesia? Well, I believe the aspects of academically is how the lecturer can be more facilitate more, as in they could really help the students. If they push students to do independent studies, what they can really do is provide them independent studies, so that the student itself can really grow from there. And culturally and socially is that I live in Penn State, which is in State College, which is a small county in the middle of basically nowhere, but they still have self-checkout machines, and very liberalist of capitalists that it could have new technologies even in a secluded county. I think by how I can implement the aspect of changes that I achieve in the other countries, share my own knowledge, share what I've learned outside of Indonesia, and from word of mouth by hanging out with friends and families, what I learned, and really make their own minds open, as I have been in Penn State, and understanding their perspective while I share my own perspective, so they can understand what I'm really trying to reach by sharing my knowledge, what I have. I think from my initial commitment started during from IISMA, it didn't really much change, because I expect that I would get broader knowledge and broader mindset, and more adapting to different situation, and I think IISMA delivered that perfectly. So I think I'm gonna still contribute to Indonesia, to my home university, to friends, to families with my knowledge, and hopefully that they could reach the perspective of what a developed country is, since Indonesia is a developing country itself, and I hope I could bring those benefits back home here, and so on and so forth.